Aloha! Today's episode is brought to you by the Western Extension Risk Management Education Center, USDA NEFA, the University of Hawaii College of Tropical Ag and Human Resources, the Livestock Extension Group, and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Center for Ag Profitability.
Aloha, welcome to the Livestock Walaʻau, a podcast aimed to provide educational support, information, guidance, and outreach to our livestock stakeholders in Hawaii. We are your hosts, Mele Oshiro and
Shannon Sand.
Today, we're going to be talking with Shannon about financial record keeping.
Yeah, this should be exciting.
Very important. Not all of us want to talk about it, but it's something that you need to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely an important thing to think about.
For those of you that are just listening, just a quick heads up, we do have a YouTube version of this episode, which may be useful for you to reference later because we are going to share some slides, or Shannon will be sharing some slides.
Yes.
And other information that way. So do check it out on the YouTube. So I would tell Shannon to give us a little bit of background on her, only because she's moved into a different position at a different university. She's still with Extension.
Yes.
But maybe she wants to give us a little bit of update of where she is. She's cold right now.
Okay.
Tell you
I'm cold now. Yeah. Not bad. We're headed into spring though, so it's okay. It only snowed on me more than I wanted it to. No, I am currently an extension educator with the Center for Ag Profitability out of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So the Center for Ag Profitability is a fairly new center. It started, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even less than that, but I think it's at least 2 years old. And basically it's designed for producers throughout the United States, to educate and bring information related to how to be profitable. Sounds really stupid, but basically things related to profitability. So like land lease stuff. There's a ABC budget calculator that you can use online and input your own information. We're currently working on creating a livestock version of that, which was part of my hire. So is to do a lot of livestock econ, which is actually my position prior to Hawaii. I did a lot of livestock econ, which is also why, and I'm passionate about it because my family comes from like a cow-calf operation. So, farm and ranch, but so it's been really good. Like I said, it's been a little colder. They've had a few freezes in the process, but overall it's been good. There's no snow right now, and that's the important thing. So I'm just excited, but it's been really good. I've gotten to go to a couple of really neat bull sales around here and meet some of the other producers and stuff. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, it's been really good so far. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about financial record keeping today. So again, I'm going to do my best to describe the slides as we go. And Mele, and this is just going to be a conversation and discussion, but there are slides that go with this if you're looking for additional information, as well as links and stuff, which will be in the show notes, as well as in the YouTube notes, description bar. That's what I'm looking for. So we're going to just discuss a few things. This is just going to be a very brief overview. Generally, when I do financial record keeping, if it's about a specific topic, it can be an hour to 3 hours long, and sometimes it's multiple sessions. But since it's just us tonight visiting, we're just going to do a brief overview of some really simple things like enterprise budgets, cash flows, and then how to use that information to make decisions, which at the end of the day, let's face it, is what we all really want to know, right?
Right.
So, and then some additional resources. So I always try and leave people with some resources that they can go to, hopefully go to, and that they find useful. So what are some of the purposes of financial records? It's coming up due this month. Taxes.
Right.
Loans. I know. Sorry. I hope you did yours. So, eligibility for government programs. So depending on the government program, sometimes you need records, and it's really handy, and to value assets. So if we're at that point in life where we're looking at transitioning our operation over to the next generation, be that children or neighbors or someone else in your life, nieces, nephews, whoever, sometimes that's very helpful, because I know with the estate and transition planning, a lot of times you want to, charge appropriately for your assets. So, and then again, it says the decision-making tool. So looking at your information and recognizing different decisions that, hopefully you can take a little bit of the emotion out of it, because we are all so attached to our operations and stuff. So sometimes you make emotional decisions rather than decisions based on numbers, or we make them based on feelings rather than facts, which I hate that saying. I'm not even gonna lie to you. But it is also true. This does help you kind of, again, just take a little bit of the emotion out of it and look at it from a very practical and business standpoint. Again, so I am currently looking at a different slide that says purpose of financial records. One of those is for the Internal Revenue Service. So it is a summary of business transaction, and then documentation to support your transactions, and then documentation regarding assets. So if you're doing IRS or financial tax reporting is what I will call it, or tax recording, it can be very different than your actual record keeping. You will have pieces that go into the IRS, but sometimes you might have more. So your Schedule F, which is what you turn in, what you already turned in, because it was due, was it the end of February, beginning of March this year that it was due? I forget. But this is an example of the Farmer's Tax Guide, and I always have to give the caveat, even though it says Farmer's Tax Guide. I know a lot of y'all are ranchers or herders or poultry people, but it's not my fault. The U.S. government calls everybody a farmer, even if you have nursery operation or landscaping or turf grass, things like that. It's all under the Farmer's Guide. So, but they are very specific about their requirement in terms of what they need and what they require. And I have done a little bit of talk about that before with Go Farm. So if you contact them, I believe they have that webinar available. So there are also other entities that you want to keep financial records for, and other reasons such as cash flows, which I really love. I love a good cash flow. It helps me know when money's coming in and when money's going out, and when I need to make sure I'm saving it for the future if that's needed. I like to do a month-to-month cash flow. I'm not even going to lie. Some people do quarterly, some people do annual, but it's whatever works for you. But I'm a big fan of month to month. So, when is insurance due? When do you need to buy, feed, or when are you selling off your animals or whatever you're doing? So debt to equity ratios are always really good. So how much do I own versus how much do I owe? I always think that's a good one. And then again, asset valuation. So depending on where you are in your business cycle, all of that stuff's important. So, all right, some ways to keep track of financial records. There are quite a few, right? So you can do something that is, I know, Melee's like, you're a little like, oh my goodness right now, aren't you? So Melee is looking at a screenshot right now of QuickBooks. So QuickBooks looks much more complicated than it is. It looks like a scary spider web of finance, doesn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's not, I promise, but it is a much more designed for someone who has, I always say in general, if you have a larger operation or you think you're going to be larger, QuickBooks is a good one to go with. If you have employees or think you're going to, again, always a good one to go with, because you have options for payroll and taxes and stuff, which you do have some of that with Quicken. But we're not going that deep into this, but I really enjoy QuickBooks a lot. I've been certified in it in the past. I've taught it. I enjoy it, and I specifically have taught it for ag, so it is a good one. It is more complicated than some other systems that are out there, but it's out there.
Is that something that you can grow with, right? Like I would say, like if you start small, it's probably something that if you're expecting to expand, it's one that you can grow with, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing is, I'm just going to tell you, I feel like it's like any project you do in life. Getting started is half the battle, but once you have your chart of accounts set up, it's really easy. And you can even do a mobile option, so you can just scan your receipts and decide where they go. But the nice thing is QuickBooks does have an ag one. Now, obviously it's very generic, so it's more designed for where I'm at than where y'all are. But even then, they don't have everything, right? So I have a lot of producers here that do both animal and pasture rotations. So they have cover crops, they have they have everything here basically. So it's really interesting. But yeah, and it's obviously not necessarily designed for most in Hawaii, but it is very easy to make those charts of accounts and to make it set up and look like your business and reflect your business. And like I said, the nice thing is once it's done, you just beep, boop, bop, bop. Do you like that robot sounds? And then you can just input as you go on your cell phone,
Right.
you know, and most places have a decent enough signal that you can do that. Or again, you can wait till you're in town and do it because I know not everywhere has signals. So this is Quicken. So Quicken and QuickBooks are both made by the same company. I teach both, but I'm not employed by either one. I don't advocate either one, but like this is just so you have some options available. Quicken is more like a checkbook. So like the old school checkbook register, I keep an electronic checkbook on my phone just so I keep track of my bills and spending. So this is a good one for small family operations. So not necessarily if you have a lot of if you have employees, again, I'd go QuickBooks just to be honest, because they have payroll options. Now there's a lot of payroll options on there, but yeah, and timekeeping as well. Versus Quicken is really nice. Again, if you're a smaller operation and you don't necessarily plan to expand too terribly much in the future, but you need to be able to keep track of your spending and you can also keep track of your family spending. So it is a really nice one. And I know some people that have both. Again, they'll have the family and the Quicken and then the other one in the QuickBooks. So you have options, right? They both do like budgeting and then you have future options like to look at like potential like budgets into the future, what your budget is based on your history is potentially going to look like. So it's really, really nice. Obviously it doesn't take into account like price changes, but I think a lot of us have a general idea when prices are going to change. So, right? Have a general idea. This is a third option, which is really simple. So it is just an Excel sheet. And I believe I include links at the end of this presentation. But you can also print this off and do it by hand. And I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping track of it as long as you're keeping track of it. Again, even if it's by hand, I was like, that is the way my dad has done it for a very long time is on pencil and paper and my mom inputs it into the computer for us. So I think a lot of people probably
a record kept is better anywhere than not having a record at all, right? So
yeah, and that brings us to the last one. I always say, even if it's in a pizza box, at least make sure you've got that information somewhere. This is a shoebox with receipts in it, but it needs to be somewhere. And that's the really important thing at the end of the day, I think, is that have those receipts, have them available so that you, or if you have a professional accountant or like a tax preparer or whatever, have that information and make sure you're keeping it for at least 7 years. I believe it's a 7-year look back right now, but it could be shorter. It could be longer. They like to change those every year. So, but I mean, all that stuff is really good and it can be used to, again, you can use all this stuff to help you make decisions. Like QuickBooks is really great because it has some super powerful tools. You can pull reports, you can pull your income statement, your balance sheets, your cash flows, your projected cash flows. And the nice thing is you can look at it and say, okay, like I know people that will do it down to the field they're on. And so they can look at it and be like, this field's not producing as much this year as this field in terms of the weights of our cattle or whatever, that like, they're like, maybe we need to look at it and see what's going on here. Or maybe we need to let it like lie fallow for a year or whatever. So there's you can take a lot out of the information you get from this. So this is a simple one that is a Google Doc spreadsheet that is open to the public. So please make your own copy. Don't play in it is my personal request. But it is just a basic financial record that if you want, it is free. It is open source. I've made that available. It's in the Google Doc linked above as well as in the show notes. The end. And I think we're going to put it in the show notes, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But it's very simple. It's just similar to a checkbook. So it's got your starting balance, your date, your description, your expense, your income, and then the account balance. And it should automatically, if I did everything right and it's still okay, it should total up. But I've used it for the last couple of years and it's been a very good tool. And so I've kind of already talked a little bit about Quicken. Again, you can get it on your computer or remotely. It's a great one for small operations. If you don't have a lot of people you're paying labor to, it's an excellent one. You can use it to, as you can see here, if you're watching the video, look at different spending categories. And again, you can separate out the business from the household, or you can combine it. It's your choice. But the nice thing is you can have a lovely little pie that shows you all the different things and how your spending has been affected over time. Again, QuickBooks looks kind of like what I like to think of as the scary spider web of accounting, but it's really not. Once you get all your chart of accounts set up, you can accept credit card payments with this bad boy. You can create invoices. This thing is really, really powerful.
But I just want to say, like, just looking at this screen, like, now, when you first put it up there, I was like, oh, that's a lot of arrows. That's a lot of icons. But actually looking at it, it really makes sense.
It makes sense.
And it really shows you like what you want to do. I mean, if you want to do something, you look for it, you figure out your way back or forward on it. So
pretty much.
I mean, it doesn't look as scary as I thought.
No, but it's just a lot more fun if I call it the scary spider web of finance. Yeah. So.
But it is a spider web, but it's nice to see how everything's connected, right? Where it's going.
It is. So like I said, once you get those chart of accounts set up, because I really do think that, again, getting started is half the battle. But once you get those chart of accounts set up, you're like, okay, this goes in my schedule F, this goes in my schedule F, schedule G, schedule whatever. Like if you have multiple businesses, this is the way to go, because you can separate out, you can make multiple businesses in this. And it has so many different categories. It has an ag category, which, like I said, it has very basic generic stuff, but you can go in and create your own specifically for yourself. So if you are doing silvopasture, so you're doing forestry and you're doing cattle or livestock, you can go in and create specific charts of accounts that go for what your operation is. Or again, a lot of people will have, especially in Hawaii, a lot of people will have multiple operations, I feel like, Mele?
Yeah.
A lot of people have more than one business, and this is a good one because you can create those separate business entities and go pull them up, and you can kind of take a look at the end of the year and be like, is this one making any money? Is this one making any money? Is this one, or, even within that. So if you have 30 acres and you have, I don't know, like 5 different, let's say orchard crops, right? Or fruit trees that you can go in there. I mean, you can be you don't have to be this particular. I do want to stress that, but you can be very particular and look and like see which one is most profitable. So you can make estimates, so it is very powerful. It is really, really cool. So yeah, it's like, but enterprise budgets. So what's in it? What is it? I really like enterprise budgets because it enables you to take just kind of a chunk of your business, or if you're thinking of adding something to the business, it's a great way to look and see how does that slot in potentially to your operation. So what are some things that are in it? Costs, returns, and then historical if you've got it or you can find it. And then why is it important? Like I said, if you're looking at slotting a business in, it's really helpful to see, is this a potential good fit for my operation? Will it slot in well?
Yeah. What exactly is an enterprise budget? How is that going to differ from?
So an enterprise budget is a partial budget. So when you think of your whole operation, it's actually a lot of pieces. So, for cattle, you have grazing, you have feed, you have mineral supplementation, you have a lot of different pieces. But say you were adding a hunting aspect to it, right? So it would be like looking at adding that. I don't know why I'm making this hand motion, but it's like, it's looking at the separate pieces, like literally of the of the operation. So like if you have cow calf and then you have a finished, like a grass finished beef, those are technically 2 separate operations in a way. Right. So again, yeah, I really like enterprise budgets. I did one for a mobile processing unit several years ago now. This is not updated in any way. I'm giving myself the caveat of this. But this one I did, and we wanted to look at, okay, so how much revenue per animal? What is contribution margin based on how many hogs they thought they were going to go through in a month. And then I wanted to look at, okay, so what is the break-even point? How many animals have to be processed in order for us to pay for this operation, for this processing unit?
Yeah.
And then based on what is the break-even point dollars, and then if we do process that many a month, how many months before we pay this off or we're break even.
Mhm.
So that's those are my preferences. I like break even analysis, so I include a lot of that. But again, this is looking at like adding a mobile processing unit to it. So this is an enterprise budget for blueberries. I pulled this from somewhere in the Northeast. I believe it was Michigan. So this is what they had for their enterprise budget. I know some folks have pulled this to use for other berries and stuff, but it's a good one. You'll have links to this all in this presentation. So it is out there. It is available, but they have everything that includes like production capacity, operating inputs. I had to spread this onto 2 different PowerPoint slides because it was so huge. Cash rent, other expenses, annual operating capital. And again, it's different for every enterprise budget that you do. Fixed costs, things like that. So I like enterprise budgets. I'm a big fan of enterprise and partial budgets, like I said, because enterprise, you look at the whole enterprise. Partial, you just slot in that piece in. So I hope that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Your face says maybe not.
No, I get what you're talking about. Yeah, no.
Yeah, so I
just
should have
wanted
been
to
more specific. I didn't do that in the beginning, but enterprise budgets is the whole thing.
Okay.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
And then partial budgets are just pieces of it
Okay.
that slot in. They are not the same thing. I'm so sorry. Cash flows are a fun one. I really like cash flows because it just tells me if I'm making money, to be honest. But it's also, I also think it's useful because you know when your bills are due. And a lot of times as producers, we don't necessarily get paid when the bills are due for the animals or for the products we're using for the animals or the vet bills or the medicine or whatever, all the upkeep and stuff. So I really like cash flows because I just think they're really handy. So what is in them, you might ask? Cash inflows and cash outflows, which sounds a lot easier than it is at times, but it is pretty simple. You just kind of have to think about what your inflows and outflows are and when they are. So why is it important? Again, I like knowing when my money's coming in and when my money is going out. And oftentimes those two do not necessarily align in the same time frame.
Yeah.
But yeah. So here's an example of a cash flow for a nursery. So you can see it's a monthly one. So we have a projected for January through December. So it's got things like seedling sales, potted palms, potted anthuriums, sales of other market items / products. I think we have links to this at the end too. And then any custom work or ag program payments and cash that were received. And then the cash inflows from capital asset sales, again, new varietals created, machinery and equipment, any sort of real estate, buildings. Now, a lot of these are not filled in if you're watching the YouTube video. And if you're listening to this auditorially, is that the right word?
Yeah.
I was like, if you're listening to this on the podcast itself in just audio format, only machinery and equipment is filled in for this, but it does have additional options. So it is nice. And then cash inflows from non-farm sources. So we have off-farm wages included in this. We have interest and dividends, which doesn't have anything in the January through December. Other business and investment, which we do have 500 in one month, 250 in another, and then 250 at 500, and then 250 and 750 later down the line, and then contributed capital and other. So cash outflows, we have a lot of those because I always feel like when you're in the business, you feel like, man, the money's going out. Sometimes it feels like faster than it's going in,
I guess you could consider those all your consumable stuff, right?
They are.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like your car and your truck expenses, it's your chemicals, custom hire work, so any machine work, things like that. Employee benefits, if you've had that. Hired labor wages, fertilizers, freight and shipping, gas, fuel, oil, farm insurance, all that fun stuff. Marketing costs, any membership fees, all of that stuff. Again, when your HCC dues are due, or your the Goat Association, the Hawaii Goat Association, whenever those are due. So again, sometimes when they're due, it doesn't always line up, and your insurance, again, all that stuff. Here's a nice, simple cash flow that is really, really nice. And this is broken down, I believe, if I recall correctly, like every 2 months. This is I want to say landscaping business, if I recall correctly. So it's got landscaping, residential, small business, large corporations, things like that for cash receipts, cash payments. It's got your variable expenses. So machinery, tools, equipment, all that fun stuff. So, and then last but not least, what you're going to do is you take some of this information from your cash flows, your balance sheets, your income statements, you put it into this farm financial scorecard. I really like this a lot. Again, I believe there are links to this in the show notes. And so you're probably looking at this if you're watching the video and you're like, where are the informations on how to do this? Again, those are in the links in the notes below. So there's actually a long explanation that goes with this that shows you how to calculate each of those and from which of the financial statements you need that. So I will just say, as an example, we only went through the cash flow. There are three main financial statements when it comes to business that we generally look at, which is cash flow, balance sheet, and income statement, or profit and loss statement. And so from those three, you can calculate all this. And I guarantee you, if you have enough to fill in your cash flow, you have enough to probably fill in the rest of those. It's just it's a lot of different things from that. Balance sheets include things like inventory. So that's always good because we also, inventory is an important thing to know. But this farm finance scorecard has like red, yellow, and green. And this was designed by the Farm Financial Standards Council. So they work in conjunction with places like Ag Credit, Farm Credit, USDA to come up with this. There are 21 different scores. Not everybody looks at all 21. Obviously, most people only look at 4 or 5 in terms of like bank and lending and grant stuff. Just kind of gives them an idea on like where your operation is. So it's a good benchmark for you to keep track of, how your business is growing and changing and things that are going on. And just because you're in red in one and green in the other, it doesn't mean you're in any sort of like bad shape at all. You know what I mean? So don't be worried if you have like a couple in the red or the yellow, as long as, you have a few in the green. Because it's kind of a balance, and even then, depending on your operation, if you're at the beginning where you're, like a cow takes 18 to 24 months. So if you do this in the beginning of your operation, you're going to be in the red a lot more than you're going to be at the end. So keep that in mind. That's what I say with this, but it is a good way to help kind of gauge your financial health. So, and I have included some resources here at the end, including my email address at Hawaii. I also have one at UNL if you want to send an email there. And then we've also included a link to the Western Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network. They have some grants and stuff still available. If you're interested in that, 1-800-FARM-AID. I really like to include that one because they also have some financial tools that I feel like not a lot of people take advantage of, but they raise a lot of money. So things like that. And then FSA in Hawaii, I always try and include them so that people have access to it. And then the Hawaii Ag Mediation Center. So, and you're going to have a ton more resources at the end of this. But yeah. So, and then for those of you listening, there's an adorable little piglet saying thank you. And then I have a ton of references to everything I did, provided, and those will be linked in the show notes below. So did I forget anything, Mele?
No, I like that all your resources, because I feel like there's a lot of resources online for like the different financial records or balance sheets and stuff that are there, but sometimes you don't know where to start or which ones are worth like getting into. So it's nice to have some references from you to be able to direct them to certain ones to maybe try out too, right?
Yeah. And for the cattle one, I'll say that I'm currently working with the Center for Ag Profitability here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to so they have an ABC calculator for like crops and stuff, but we're working on developing a livestock one. So once that's done, you basically will just put in your own numbers and it should pump out a budget for you.
Yeah.
So I also want really handy when it's completed in the next year or so.
Yeah. So I also want to say that we have some other decision tools from another grant that was worked on by Dr. Dylan Fates.
Yes, and those are Hawaii specific, which is nice.
And really has to do with retained ownership of cattle and whatnot. So if you're a producer that ships off and you're in deciding to retain or not retain ownership, those are sort of some financial and not really record keeping, but it is a financial document that you can use. You can use to help with that. And that might even be something that you can play with to sort of look back at, potential revenues for you, right? In your record keeping and your finances and stuff. So that's another option. And
we can include links to that at the end of this as well, because I mean, those are really powerful tools that Dylan came up with. And we should link to his because we had him a couple of times, but he just did one a couple months ago, I think.
Yeah. So there is an episode about the tools and a website, YouTube video and everything. So
but we should link to that.
Yeah. And if we'll also be putting the beef webinars that we did, or beef workshop we did into a webinar. So
nice.
He'll talk about that there and some other decision tools. So but I think you could go out and look, but I like Quicken. I mean, I haven't messed with it, but to just be able to see like that screenshot there that you showed and the connections between all the different tools that they have, I think it just puts it, like, for me visually, that was like, oh, okay, I get it. So
yeah, you kind of have to stare at it for a second and then you're like, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense why it goes together this way.
Yeah. So thank you, Shannon, for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
It's such an it's so important things we don't always think about, and I always am that one that go like, God, I wish I would have put this into something format that's a little bit easier at the end, right? To kind of spit everything out and
but
give
like
you
I said, even if you just want to do your family stuff, you can do Quicken, and they have a mobile option. So again, if you want to do something simple, like Quicken's a good option. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more of a challenge to set up, but once it's set up, I do have to give those caveats. It's really kind of smooth sailing, because again, you can get it on your phone and you can just
I kind of feel like that. A lot of things are that way, right? It takes you time to set up, but worth the time to set up.
Worth the time to set up. Yeah, later. Absolutely. Well, I hope our listeners found this informative and that it'll be useful to them. Also, if you have not already done so, please be sure to fill out our feedback fest to let us know your thoughts about this podcast. That's a continuous thing. We like to keep rolling here so that we can, always get constant feedback and have information of what you want to learn about next.
Make sure to follow us on our social media pages, the Livestock Walaʻau and the Livestock Extension Group, if you haven't already. And be sure to visit the UHCTAR Extension website and our YouTube channel listed in the show notes.
For additional information about this topic, see the show notes of the podcast and the description box of our YouTube page. Thanks for listening to the Livestock Walaʻau. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to this podcast, and then stay tuned for next month.
Thanks again to our sponsors, the Western Extension Risk Management Education Center, USD, NIFA, the Livestock Extension Group, CTAR, and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Center for Ag Profitability. Thanks again for listening. Ahui ho!
Ahui ho!